Each stray pup rushed to the rejected Omega, until the Alpha King found out her secret. Shadows stretched long across the twisted roots and moss-covered stones, creating paths that few dared to wander. Yet for Lyra, this forest was home. It had been home for as long as she could remember, a sanctuary for the rejected, the lost, and the forgotten. Lyra, known among the villagers as the Omega, walked lightly among the trees. Her hair, the color of midnight, fell over her shoulders in soft waves, and her eyes, a pale silver, reflected the dim light of the forest in a way that made them seem otherworldly. She moved quietly, careful not to disturb the sleeping wolves that roamed in the distance, and she carried a small satchel filled with herbs and food scraps. No one in the kingdom wanted her. Not the villagers who whispered about her strange gifts, nor the nobles, who feared anything they could not control. Even the wolves in the royal packs, proud and powerful, treated her as if she were invisible. But Lyra did not mind. She had learned long ago that acceptance was rare, and that survival meant relying on her own strength, not the kindness of others. And yet, despite her isolation, Lyra had something precious, a small group of stray pups that had begun to follow her through the forest. They came to her in silence at first, hiding in the shadows of her cottage-like hut on the edge of the woods. Some were small, trembling with fear, others slightly older, their fur matted and dirty. All of them had been abandoned or lost, and all of them had found comfort only with her. Lyra knelt to the smallest of the pups, a tiny brown one with trembling paws. There, she whispered, brushing a strand of hair from its forehead. You're safe now. I won't let anyone hurt you. The pup yipped softly and nuzzled her hand, and Lyra smiled, though it did not reach her eyes. She was good with them, yes, but that warmth was reserved for creatures who could never betray her. Humans had a way of doing that, of bringing pain and disappointment into her carefully built world. The quiet of the forest was broken suddenly by a rustling sound. Lyra's ears twitched, and she rose to her feet, moving toward the noise with caution. The pups scurried behind her, their small bodies pressed close to the ground. Lyra's hand went to the dagger she carried at her belt, though she hated to use it. Violence was dangerous, even for her. From the shadows emerged a young wolf, larger than the pups but smaller than the grand wolves of the royal pack. Its fur was silver, streaked with black, and its amber eyes glimmered with curiosity. It stopped a few feet from her, tilting its head as though studying her. Lyra froze, unsure whether it was friend or foe. "You're not afraid," a voice said from behind the tree line. Lyra spun, dagger raised, but relaxed slightly when she saw no one there. "Who's there?" she asked, her voice steady but wary. The voice came again, softer this time. "I mean no harm. I have been watching you." Lyra frowned. The forest was her domain, her sanctuary, and yet someone was trespassing. She felt a flicker of unease, the kind that had become familiar in her life. "And why would anyone watch me?" she asked. There was a pause, and then a figure stepped into the dim light. A man, tall and imposing, with dark hair and a regal bearing. His cloak was black, embroidered with silver threads that caught the little sunlight that filtered through the trees. His eyes, deep and commanding, met hers without hesitation. "I am Kale," he said simply, "Alpha of the royal pack." Lyra stiffened. The Alpha King. She had heard of him, of course, stories of his strength, his unyielding authority, and his unapproachable nature. To see him here in her forest, staring at her as if she were both a curiosity and a challenge, made her heart beat faster. Not with fear exactly, but with something new, something she did not want to admit even to herself. Lyra began, but no words came. She had never spoken to royalty before, she had never expected to. Kale studied her silently for a long moment. "You have strays with you," he said finally, nodding toward the pups. "They follow you willingly. You are unusual." Lyra's hand rested on the head of the brown pup. "I care for them," she said simply. "They have nowhere else to go." Kale's gaze softened almost imperceptibly. "Compassion is rare," he murmured. Then he straightened. Yet the world you inhabit is dangerous. You must know that your kindness makes you vulnerable." Lyra did not answer. She had lived her life in shadows, learning that kindness could be both a gift and a curse. She had survived this long because she was careful and because she had few attachments. Yet even as she thought this, a part of her wished Kale had not appeared, for his presence stirred something she could not name, a mix of curiosity, fear, and longing. The wolf stepped forward, silver fur glinting. Lyra froze again. She could feel the raw power emanating from it, a silent authority that demanded respect. She wanted to recoil, but something in the pup's steady gaze made her stay. "You protect them," Kale said, his voice a little softer now. "And yet you remain hidden. Why?" Lyra looked away toward the deep trees. "I am not wanted," she said quietly. "Not by humans, not by wolves. I survive here because it is all I can do." Kale's eyes narrowed slightly, and she thought she saw a flash of surprise. "Not wanted," he repeated. "I do not believe that. There is a strength in you hidden that even I can sense. It is dangerous, perhaps even forbidden, but it is there." Lyra's breath caught. Strength. Forbidden. She had always been small, overlooked, underestimated. To hear this from the Alpha King himself unsettled her. She had lived so long in the shadows that she had forgotten what it felt like to be seen. Before she could respond, a sound from deeper in the forest made both of them tense. A low growl, distant but clear, echoed through the trees. The pups whined nervously, clustering around Lyra. She instinctively moved in front of them, her dagger ready. Kale's eyes followed the sound, and then he turned back to her. "Danger lurks," he said simply. "It does not wait for the weak or the hesitant. You must decide, will you face it, or will you remain in the shadows?" Lyra swallowed hard. She had faced danger before, yes, but not like this. Not with the Alpha King watching, not with her heart suddenly caught in the pull of something she did not understand. Yet the thought of running, of hiding forever, seemed suddenly unbearable. She had cared for the pups, yes, but she had also longed for a connection that went beyond survival. She began, but the growl grew louder, closer now. A large, dark wolf, one she had never seen before, emerged from the underbrush, eyes glowing with menace. The pups yipped and scattered, and Lyra felt a surge of fear, but also of something else. A determination that had been buried deep inside her, waiting for the right moment. Kale moved, fluid and powerful, stepping between her and the wolf. The silver wolf growled back, and Lyra realized with a shock that it was not attacking her, not yet. It was testing her, testing the strength she had so long kept hidden. "Move," Kale said, his voice low and commanding. "Show me who you are." Lyra hesitated, then clenched her dagger, feeling the fear turn to fire in her chest. She had always been careful, always been cautious, but this moment demanded courage. She stepped forward, holding herself tall despite the tremble in her legs. The dark wolf lunged, and instinct took over. Lyra ducked, rolled, and grabbed a branch, swinging it with precision she did not know she possessed. The wolf stumbled, snarling, and Kale moved to restrain it, his strength incredible. Together, they forced the wolf back, and when it finally fled, the forest fell silent again. Lyra's chest heaved, and she looked at Kale. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes held something: acknowledgement, respect, perhaps even something warmer. "You are stronger than they say," Kale said quietly, "and braver." Lyra lowered her dagger, unsure how to respond. For the first time in her life, she felt seen. Truly seen, not as a threat, not as a shadow, but as someone who mattered. Yet even as relief washed over her, a sliver of unease remained. Kale, the Alpha King, had seen her strength, and if he could see it, others could too. Lyra gathered the pups, hugging them close. "We should go," she whispered, "before anyone else finds us." Kale watched her, a faint shadow of a smile on his lips. "I will find you again," he said softly, "and next time the forest may not protect you." Lyra shivered, though not from cold. The words hung in the air like a promise, a warning, and something more she could not yet name. The forest seemed darker now, heavier with secrets, but Lyra felt something stir inside her, a hope she had not allowed herself in years. Maybe, just maybe, her story was not yet over, and somewhere in the distance, Kale's presence lingered, like a shadow she could not escape, nor did she wish to. The morning light filtered through the forest like silver threads, but Lyra hardly noticed. The forest, usually a place of quiet and safety, felt different now. The memory of the dark wolf and the alpha king, Kale, lingered like a shadow over her heart. She moved among the trees with the pups trailing close, their small bodies pressing against her legs for comfort. "They will come again," she whispered to herself, though she was not sure if she meant the wolves or Kale. Her chest tightened with a mix of fear and curiosity. She had never met anyone like him. Strong, commanding, yet there had been a softness, a fleeting recognition that unsettled her. The pups scampered ahead, chasing small birds and insects, unaware of the danger their world carried. Lyra smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She wished she could be like them, carefree, unafraid, yet she could not escape the sense that her life was about to change. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden movement. From behind a grove of trees, Kale emerged. His presence made the forest feel smaller, as if the air itself bowed to his authority. He did not run, he did not hide. He simply watched her as if he had expected her all along. "You again," Lyra said, her voice trembling slightly, though she tried to keep it steady. "Why are you here?" Kale's gaze swept over the pups before returning to her. "I need to speak with you," he said. "You are not safe here, Lyra. The forest may protect you from some, but not from all. And now others are searching for you." Lyra's heart skipped a beat. "Searching for me? Who?" Kale's eyes darkened. "Enemies, those who would use your gifts for their own gain. You have a power, Lyra, and power always draws attention." Lyra stiffened. She had long hidden her abilities. Her power, the strange, shadowy gift that allowed her to manipulate light and dark, to sense danger, to speak to the creatures of the forest, had always been her secret. It had kept her alive, yes, but it had also made her a target, something others feared. "I do not want trouble," she said quietly. "I only want to live in peace." Kale stepped closer, his movements calm but deliberate. "Peace is a luxury few can afford in this world. You can hide for now, but soon, hiding will not be enough. I can help you if you let me." Lyra's chest tightened. There was something in his tone that both comforted and terrified her. She had never known anyone who could offer her protection and yet demand so much without asking. She shook her head. "I do not need your help. I can manage." Kale's gaze softened, but his eyes did not lose their intensity. "Can you?" he asked quietly. "The pups, you care for them, you protect them. But what will you do if the threat comes to you and them both? Will you risk everything alone?" Lyra looked down at the pups, their eyes wide and trusting. She could not bear the thought of losing them. She had built her life around protecting them, and now a storm seemed to be gathering on the horizon, one that she could not face alone. Kale noticed her hesitation. "You are strong, Lyra, stronger than you believe, but even the strongest sometimes need guidance." The words struck a chord within her. She had always believed that relying on others was dangerous, that trust led only to betrayal. Yet something about Kale made her want to believe differently. Before she could respond, a rustle came from deeper in the forest. The pups growled softly, ears flattening against their heads. Lyra's hand went to the dagger at her belt, though she did not want to use it. A dark figure emerged from the shadows, a wolf, larger and more dangerous than any she had encountered. Its eyes glowed with malice, and it moved with a calculated grace, circling her as if assessing her. Kale moved in front of her immediately, his body tense and ready. "Step back," he commanded, his voice calm but filled with authority. Lyra hesitated. She wanted to trust him, yet a part of her feared being pushed aside, being seen as weak or incapable. She stood her ground, and to her surprise, Kale did not move her. He simply watched, ready to act if necessary. The wolf lunged suddenly, teeth bared. Lyra's heart pounded, but instinct took over. She extended her hands and a shadowy barrier of energy flared around her, stopping the wolf in its tracks. The creature yelped and circled, uneasy, as if it had not expected such power from someone so small. Kale's eyes widened slightly, but he did not speak. He moved with precision, forcing the wolf to retreat without striking it fatally. Together they drove it back into the shadows. When the danger passed, Lyra sank to her knees, trembling. The pups gathered around her, nuzzling her hands and licking her face. She had never felt such relief, nor such exhaustion. Kale approached her slowly, kneeling beside her. "You are remarkable," he said quietly. "Do you understand what I see in you?" Lyra shook her head, her hair falling over her face. "I am only trying to survive," she whispered. "That is all." Kale reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. His touch was gentle, yet it carried the weight of authority and intention. "Survival is not enough, Lyra. You are destined for more than hiding in the shadows. Your gifts, your heart, they matter." Lyra's breath caught. No one had ever spoken to her this way before. No one had ever seen her, truly seen her, and spoken with both recognition and respect. Her chest ached with a mix of fear and longing she could not name. "You speak of destiny," she said softly. "But what if my destiny is to be alone, to protect these pups and nothing else?" Kale's gaze softened, though his eyes remained intense. "Loneliness is not strength, Lyra. Strength is knowing when to fight and when to trust. You have the power to protect, yes, but also to heal. You have a choice: continue hiding or embrace what you are meant to be." Lyra's fingers brushed against the pup's soft fur. She had always believed that her life was small, insignificant. But Kale's words stirred something inside her, a spark of courage, of hope. Could she truly be more than the Omega, the one everyone rejected? Before she could respond, a sudden scream echoed through the forest. The pups yipped and scattered, and Lyra's heart leapt. She ran toward the sound, Kale close behind her. A small clearing revealed the source: another pup, caught in a trap set by hunters. Its leg was pinned and it whimpered in pain. Lyra's chest tightened, and without thinking she rushed forward. Kale stopped her gently. "Let me," he said, but she shook her head. "I can do this. It is my responsibility." Carefully, she knelt beside the trapped pup, her hands glowing faintly with shadowy energy. The trap rattled, but she did not falter. The energy flowed from her hands, loosening the metal just enough for the pup to escape. It stumbled free, yipping and nuzzling her hand in gratitude. Kale watched silently, impressed by her courage and control. For the first time, he saw not only her power but the depth of her compassion. She was not just strong, she was brave, selfless, and capable of facing dangers no one else could. The forest fell silent again, but the tension lingered. Lyra straightened, brushing dirt from her clothes. "We must go," she said, her voice firm. "It is not safe here." Kale nodded. "I will stay with you," he said. "For now. You cannot face this alone, Lyra, not when the danger is growing." Lyra's heart pounded. She had never allowed anyone to stay so close, to offer protection, to see her as more than the rejected Omega. And yet with Kale there was a strange comfort, a sense of partnership she had never known. As they moved deeper into the forest, the pups following, Lyra glanced at him. "Why do you care?" she asked quietly. "Why would the Alpha King care about someone like me?" Kale's gaze met hers, steady and unwavering. "Because you are not someone like you," he said softly. "You are extraordinary, and extraordinary things cannot be ignored." Lyra felt a shiver run down her spine. His words were not just recognition. They were a promise, a challenge, a warning, and perhaps something more. For the first time in her life, Lyra felt that the shadows around her were not just places of hiding. They were also places of strength, places where she could discover who she truly was. And with Kale by her side, the future, though dangerous, seemed filled with possibilities she had never dared to imagine. But as they disappeared into the deeper woods, neither noticed the pair of amber eyes watching them from above, hidden among the branches. The forest had many secrets, and some were far more dangerous than any wolf or hunter. And one day, Lyra would have to face them. The deeper they went into the forest, the more the world seemed to shift around Lyra. Trees towered like ancient guardians, their branches intertwining to form a natural cathedral above, where beams of sunlight pierced the canopy like swords of light. Every step she took felt heavier, as if the shadows themselves were aware of her presence, watching, testing, waiting. Kale moved beside her with a quiet grace that made the forest feel safer. His gaze, sharp and alert, swept the surroundings constantly, yet it often returned to her. There was something in the way he looked at her that made her skin warm, yet her heart tremble. She had survived alone for so long that the feeling of being watched, truly watched, not judged or feared, was disorienting. "You are unusually calm for someone walking into danger," Kale said quietly, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Lyra glanced at him, her silver eyes meeting his amber ones. "I have lived with fear every day," she said softly. "It is nothing new. I have learned to move through it, not let it control me." Kale nodded slowly. "And yet I sense something more within you. A power restrained, yes, but ready. It is why you survived the forest alone, why the pups seek you, why I cannot look away." Lyra's fingers twitched. She had hidden her gift carefully, only revealing it when necessary. Her ability to manipulate shadows, to sense danger, and to communicate in subtle ways with creatures of the forest had always been a secret. She had never considered anyone else could understand it, let alone someone like Kale. "Why do you care so much about my gifts?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Why does it matter to you?" Kale stopped and faced her, his expression unreadable though his eyes softened slightly. "Because such power is rare. Because it could either save you or destroy you, and because I see in you a reflection of what I have lost." Lyra tilted her head, curiosity flickering despite her caution. "What have you lost?" Kale looked away, toward the shadows between the trees. "I lost someone I cared for. Long ago, before I became alpha, before I had to learn the weight of command. I cannot lose again, not when the stakes are so high." Lyra wanted to reach out to ask more, but a sudden sound stopped her. A low hiss, like wind through dead leaves, sent a shiver down her spine. The pups whimpered, pressing against her legs. From the darkness emerged a wolf unlike any she had seen before. Its fur was black as night, eyes glowing crimson, and it moved with a predatory grace that made her heart pound. It was larger than Kale's wolves, and its presence radiated danger. Kale's stance stiffened, muscles coiling like springs. "Stay close," he instructed, his voice calm but firm. "This is no ordinary wolf. It is drawn to you." Lyra felt a chill, drawn to her. That could only mean one thing: her gift, her secret, was calling attention she had tried to avoid for so long. The wolf lunged. Lyra's instincts flared. She extended her hands, and the shadows around her stirred, forming a protective barrier that shimmered like liquid darkness. The wolf yelped, retreating slightly, then circled her, testing, calculating. Kale moved to her side, positioning himself between her and the wolf. His presence was a shield as much as her magic, and together they created a barrier that held the beast at bay. "You have grown stronger," Kale said quietly, almost to himself. "I did not expect this." Lyra's chest heaved. "I have no choice. They will come for me if I do not protect myself. And the pups." Kale's eyes softened at the mention of the pups. "Your heart is as strong as your magic," he said. "Do you understand what that means?" Lyra shook her head, exhausted. I do not know." Kale reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. The touch was electric, yet gentle, and Lyra's breath caught. "It means you are extraordinary, and extraordinary things never remain hidden for long." The wolf snarled again, forcing them both to focus. Lyra lifted her hands once more, letting the shadows rise around her. The energy pulsed, strong and alive, and the wolf yelped, retreating into the dark underbrush. For a moment the forest was still. Lyra sank to her knees, panting, and the pups gathered around her, their small bodies trembling. Kale knelt beside her, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. "You are remarkable," he said, his voice soft but resonant. "Do you understand the power you hold?" Lyra shook her head. I try not to think about it. It is too dangerous." Kale's gaze held hers. "Dangerous, yes, but also necessary. You cannot hide forever, Lyra, not when your enemies are gathering strength." Lyra's heart sank. She had lived her life avoiding notice, avoiding danger, avoiding connection. And yet here he was, forcing her to confront not only her abilities but her own desires. "Why are you helping me?" she asked softly. "You do not owe me anything." Kale's eyes softened, and for a fleeting moment the Alpha King seemed less like a ruler and more like a man who had suffered and endured. "Because no one else will," he said simply. "And because I see in you what I once saw in someone else's potential. Courage. And something I cannot forget." Lyra's chest ached. Words failed her, as they always did when her heart and mind collided. She wanted to speak, to ask, to run, yet the forest felt both confining and protective, as if it itself acknowledged her presence and power. Suddenly a sound echoed through the trees, the rustle of leaves, the snapping of a branch. Lyra's instincts flared. "They are coming," she whispered, more to herself than to Kale. Kale's expression hardened. "Then we prepare," he said. "You must learn to trust not only your power but mine as well. Together we can face what comes." Lyra swallowed hard. Trust. She had avoided it all her life. Yet something about Kale, the way he had protected the pups, the way he had not pushed her aside, the way he had spoken with honesty, made her believe, however faintly, that she could try. The forest darkened further as shadows lengthened. Lyra rose to her feet, her hands trembling slightly as she drew on the energy within her. She felt it stir, a living force responding to her fear, her courage, her determination. It pulsed around her like a heartbeat, and she realized with awe that she was not just defending herself. She was shaping the forest, bending it subtly to her will. Kale watched silently, his expression unreadable but intense. "Do not fear it," he said. "It is a part of you. Part of who you are meant to be." Lyra nodded slowly, drawing in a steadying breath. She had always been the Omega, the rejected one, the one no one wanted or believed in. But now, with the pups by her side and Kale watching, she felt a spark of something she had never felt before: hope. "We must move," Kale said, his voice cutting through her thoughts. "The others will come. They sense your power. And if they find you unprepared, you and the pups will not survive." Lyra's heart pounded, but she nodded. "Lead the way," she said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. As they moved through the forest, she felt the shadows respond to her presence, curling around her legs, lifting from the ground, forming protective barriers. She realized that her fear had been a limiter all these years. Her power was not just a weapon, it was a guide, a shield, a way to connect with the world in ways she had never imagined. Kale walked beside her, silent but vigilant. She could feel his presence like a heartbeat next to her own, steady, strong, protective. And though she did not yet understand the feeling stirring inside her, she knew one thing: she was no longer alone. The forest seemed to sense it too. The trees leaned closer, the shadows softened, and even the wind whispered encouragement. Lyra realized that the world she had feared for so long was not entirely hostile. It could be shaped, protected, even healed. And perhaps, just perhaps, she could shape herself as well. But as the forest opened into a small glade, Lyra paused. The clearing was quiet, too quiet. The shadows around her seemed to gather unnaturally, forming shapes she could not immediately recognize. Kale's hand touched her shoulder, grounding her. "Something is coming," he said quietly. "And this time it will not be easy." Lyra nodded, gripping her dagger tightly. The shadows around her shimmered, alive with energy. She was ready, though fear still danced along the edges of her mind. She was ready to face whatever came next, with Kale, with the pups, and with the power that had always been hers, waiting for her to claim it. And somewhere deep within the forest, Unseen eyes watched, calculating, waiting. Lyra's secret was no longer hidden. And once it was discovered, nothing would ever be the same. The ruined temple sat atop the hill like a silent sentinel, its stones blackened with age and shadows curling along its broken walls. Lyra and Kale approached carefully, the pups trailing behind them, their small bodies alert and tense. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if the weight of the past and the uncertainty of the future pressed down on them. "This place, it feels wrong," Lyra whispered, her silver eyes scanning the crumbling archways. The shadows seemed alive here, moving with a will of their own. Kale's hand brushed against hers, not touching but close enough that she felt a spark. "It is where the threat gathers," he said, "and it is where you will finally understand what you are." Lyra swallowed, a mix of fear and anticipation churning in her chest. She had learned to trust her instincts, her shadows, and even Kale. But this place, this dark, ruined place, called to something deep inside her, something that had waited for her all her life. The shadows shifted around her hands, rising like black smoke, responding to her fear and determination. She had trained herself to control them, but here, in this ancient temple, they felt stronger, wilder, almost sentient. Kale stepped beside her, his presence steadying her. "Do not fight it," he said softly. "Embrace it. Let it guide you." Lyra nodded, focusing on the power within her. She could feel it pulsing, strong and alive, as if it had waited for the right moment to awaken fully. The temple walls seemed to react, the shadows deepening, moving, forming shapes that hinted at the dangers to come. Suddenly, a low rumble shook the ground. From the darkness, the enemy emerged, wolves and humans alike, corrupted by greed and hunger for her power. Their eyes glowed with malicious intent, and they advanced like a single shadowed wave. Kale stepped forward, his voice ringing like a command across the courtyard. "Stand behind me." Lyra hesitated for a moment, but the pups barked and growled, trusting her, looking to her for guidance. She took a deep breath and raised her hands, letting the shadows surge forward, forming a protective barrier around them. The enemies halted, growling and snapping at the invisible wall that kept them at bay. "You are ready," Kale said, his amber eyes meeting hers. "Now show them what it means to face an Omega who refuses to bow." Lyra felt a surge of courage she had never known. This was no longer about survival. It was about protection, about standing for those who could not stand for themselves. She let the shadows flow outward, shaping them into tendrils that twisted and struck at the enemy, not to harm but to restrain, to protect, to warn. Kale moved beside her, his presence a shield and a guide. Together they were unstoppable, a blend of raw power and careful strategy. The enemies faltered, unable to comprehend the strength of the Omega and the Alpha united. The battle raged around them, fierce yet controlled. Lyra felt exhaustion creeping in, but she refused to yield. The pups darted between the shadows, distracting smaller threats, their loyalty unwavering. Each movement, each breath, each pulse of shadow magic brought Lyra closer to understanding herself. Kale glanced at her, his voice low and intense. "Do not fear your power. Fear only weakens the heart. Trust yourself." Lyra nodded, letting the shadows become an extension of her will. She could see everything now, the enemies, the protective circle of the temple, even the subtle energies that pulsed through the ruins. With Kale beside her, she was unstoppable. As the last of the attackers were pushed back into the shadows, the forest seemed to exhale. The ruined temple, dark and ancient, now felt alive with a strange serenity. Lyra sank to her knees, panting, the pups gathering around her for comfort. Kale knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You did it," he said softly. "You embraced who you are." Lyra shook her head, still overwhelmed by the power she had wielded. I could not have done it alone," she whispered. Kale's hand covered hers, a firm and grounding presence. "And you will never be alone," he said. "Not as long as I am here, not as long as the pups are with you. We face the world together." Lyra looked into his eyes, and for the first time she allowed herself to feel something she had hidden for years: hope, trust, a bond that went beyond fear, beyond survival. It was something deeper, something unspoken but undeniable. The wind whispered through the broken walls, carrying the scent of earth and shadow. Lyra realized that her life had changed irrevocably. She was no longer the rejected Omega, hiding in the shadows. She was a protector, a guide, a force that could shape her world. Kale stood, extending a hand to help her rise. "The kingdom will hear of your strength," he said, "and not all will welcome it, but those who see with true eyes will understand." Lyra took his hand, feeling the warmth of his touch, the solidity of his presence. "I do not know if I am ready for the kingdom," she admitted. "I am still learning, still discovering who I am." Kale nodded. "None of us are ever fully ready," he said. "But courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is acting despite it. You have that, Lyra. More than anyone I have ever known." The pups barked and yipped, tugging at her cloak, their small bodies full of energy and joy. Lyra laughed softly, feeling a lightness she had never known. The forest, the temple, even the lingering shadows seemed to recognize her change. She was no longer afraid to be seen. As they prepared to leave the temple, Kale paused, turning to her with a serious expression. "There is one thing you must understand," he said. "Your gift, it will always draw attention. There will always be those who wish to control it, to use it. You must be vigilant." Lyra nodded. "I understand," she said, "but I am not alone anymore. I have you and the pups and myself." Kale smiled faintly, a rare softness in his usually stern expression. "Good. That is all that matters." They began their descent from the hill, the ruins fading behind them, but the lessons of the temple etched in their hearts. Lyra felt stronger, not just in power but in spirit. She knew that challenges would come, that enemies would test her again, but she no longer feared them as she once had. As they reached the forest edge, Kale looked down at her, his expression unreadable yet intense. "Lyra," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "there is something I must tell you. I have never met anyone like you, not in strength, not in heart. You remind me of someone I lost, someone I loved. And yet you are different. You are you." Lyra's breath caught. She did not know how to respond. Words had always failed her when emotions ran too deep. She only nodded, letting her gaze meet his. Kale's hand found hers again, and for a moment the world seemed to pause. The wind rustled, the pups barked, and the forest watched silently. Lyra realized that she had found something she never thought possible, not just strength, not just purpose, but connection. A bond that was unspoken, yet undeniable. Suddenly, from the edge of the forest, a flicker of movement caught her eye. Shadows shifted unnaturally, and Lyra tensed. She had learned that the world was never fully safe. But this time, she did not feel fear. She felt readiness, determination, and the quiet assurance that she could face whatever came next. Kale noticed her change in stance, the way her hands glowed faintly with controlled energy. He smiled, a small, genuine expression that made her heart flutter. "Whatever comes," he said, "we face it together." Lyra's lips curved into a faint smile. "Together," she echoed. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Lyra looked at Kale, at the pups, at the forest that had been both her prison and her sanctuary. She realized that the journey was far from over, but she was no longer the same Omega who had hidden in the shadows. She was a protector, a fighter, a being of light and shadow intertwined. And as they walked toward the village, the world seemed to hum with possibility. Shadows still lingered, yes, but they no longer frightened her. They were a part of her, as was Kale, and as were the loyal pups who had chosen her as their family. Lyra knew one thing with certainty. The kingdom, the forest, and even the enemies who lurked in darkness could no longer define her. She would face them all with courage, with heart, and with the bond she had finally allowed herself to accept. And somewhere deep within, a quiet thought whispered, this was only the beginning. The shadows behind them twisted and danced, but they were no longer chains. They were allies, mirrors of the strength she had claimed. And as Lyra walked forward, hand in hand with Kale, surrounded by the loyal pups, she knew that she was ready to embrace whatever destiny awaited, not as a rejected Omega, but as a force to be reckoned with, a protector and a light in the darkness.